Hi, everyone. I wanted to go over the summarizing activity for the Age of Responsibility assignment for this week. So this is our first experience with this article. So this article is written by Greenblatt, and it explores the contradictory nature of the Age of Responsibility. Last week, we looked at some of the terms, we got ourselves familiar with some of the conversations that are being had about it, but now we're looking at an article and we're going to practice how to effectively summarize. But how do you even do that? So let's take a look here in this presentation. What is effective summarizing? So effective summarizing condenses the main point and key information into 1 to 2 sentences. So it's not long, right? If your summary is over 4 sentences, what's the point of you summarizing what you just read if you can go back and read it if it's the same number of sentences that you summarized? The whole point is to condense it, is to make it smaller. And in that sense, we target the main idea. So we want to highlight the main idea and ask ourselves while we're reading, why is this section important? What's the main idea and what's its significance, essentially? Why is it there? Of course, we need to state this in our own words. A summary is not quoting what the author has already said, or else there's no point, and it is not copying and pasting directly from the text. Or else, again, what's the point? That we're not effectively summarizing, we're just restating what was already said. Instead, a 2-sentence summary, which is what you'll be doing on this activity that I'll show you in a second, a 2-sentence summary should capture the main idea in the first sentence, what's the topic, what's being discussed here, and in the second sentence, explain why it's important. What's the significance? So what? How does this support the author's argument? That's what we'll be looking at next. So remember, a summary condenses the author's main point into 1 to 2 sentences. But how do you know what the main point is? How do you know what's the important information and what isn't, what to weed out and what not to? One thing that helps me remember is the 3 W's of summarizing. So the 3 W's are who, what, and why. Who being who's the subject of the summary? Who's being talked about? Is it a specific person, a group, an animal, an organization? What is it? But we need to have a subject for that summary. Next, so you have the who, and now you have the what. That what is the topic or main idea being discussed, right? What's the context? What are we even talking about in the first place? What's the idea being brought across? Lastly, and this is where what should be able to answer the main idea. What is the main idea? And then, of course, why? Why does this section matter? Why is it important or significant to the author's claim? Why is it here? What's its purpose? And so that's what we're going to be looking at in this section summary activity. So you'll see here at the top, you have instructions for how to read and annotate while you are summarizing. So underneath each section, section A, section B, C, and so forth, you'll see that there's a yellow box titled section summary and a spot for you in which to write. And according to the directions, you're going to write your summary in the box below the section. Within your summary, you will highlight the who in yellow, the what in orange, and the why in green. And your summary should be 2 to 3 sentences. They need to be a minimum of 2, and I'll show you why. So remember, when summarizing, we use the 3 W's. Who is being talked about in this section? What's the topic or main idea being discussed? And why? Why does this section matter? Why is it important to the author's claim? But remember, we want it to be 2 to 3 sentences because our first sentence should capture the who and the what, right? Who's the subject and what's the main idea? And then our second sentence should be the why. So let's take a look down here. So I have an example here for you, but we're going to look at this section summary. We're going to do this together. So section A, I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we're going to map it in accordance to the 3 W's before we summarize it like I just explained. So for section A, Justin McNall grew up in a hurry. By the time he was 23, McNall had graduated from college, married, and gone to work for his local police force in Virginia. But McNall, now 36, still bristles at the memory of something he wasn't allowed to do at 23: go down to the airport counter and rent a car. I've been involved in police pursuits at more than 100 miles per hour, he says, and yet they still wouldn't rent me a car. To many young people, rental car restrictions are more than an annoyance. They're also a confusing contradiction in terms of what society expects of them. After all, states trust people to drive at much younger age. Most states issue driver's license to persons as young as 16 years old. Yet nearly a decade must pass before the same persons can earn the trust of Hertz or Avis, which are rental car companies. Okay, so let's go back up to our 3 W's. So the first thing I need to be able to do is identify who's being talked about in this section. Well, is there a specific person? I would say, yeah. It looks like it's Justin McNall, isn't it? So Justin McNall is the subject. And what is he? He is a police officer. So Justin McNall, a 23-year-old police officer, that's our subject. He was able to be in police pursuits at 100 miles per hour, but he wasn't able to rent a car. That seems to be the main idea of this entire section. He was able to be in police pursuits. He was able to be in a cop car, go down the freeway, fly after these people who maybe stolen something or committed some other crime, yet he wasn't able to rent a car. So we have the who: Justin McNall, 23-year-old police officer, and the what. What's the topic? He was able to be a police officer, but he wasn't able to rent a car. And so what? Who cares? But before we get to that why, ignore this part here. This is how our first sentence should look. That yellow is the who, right? We just identified that. Justin McNall, 23-year-old police officer. So in this example, I put at 23, police officer Justin McNall. And what was the what? What's the main idea? He was able to be a police officer, but he wasn't able to rent a car. Kind of ironic, right? Could pursue lawbreakers at 100 miles per hour, but he couldn't rent a car. But now we need the why. Going back up to our 3 W's, the why, we have the who, Justin McNall. We have the what, be able to be a police officer, not able to rent a car. But the big so what that our why is going to answer, why does this matter? What claim is this supporting? Well, I think that's all evident in the second paragraph, don't you? To many young people, rental car restrictions are more than an annoyance. They're also a confusing contradiction in terms of what society suspects of them. I would agree with that, right? After all, states trust people to drive at a much younger age, and that makes sense. So Justin McNall at 23 was able to be in high chase pursuits in a police car, but he wasn't able to rent a car just for leisurely relaxing while he was on vacation. That seems to be pretty significant to me. And I feel like that's going to support our author's argument as we continue to read. So I'm going to add that here. So my first sentence is done. My first sentence has the who and it has the what. Now my second sentence of my summary is going to strictly be reserved for my why. Right? This is significant. This is one example. This is important because it is a contradictory and confusing expectation that states place on young people when it comes to the age of responsibility, right? It's a contradiction. It's confusing in terms of what society expects of them. So that's why it's significant. Why does it matter? Because it reveals, this section is an example of, this section illustrates how confusing the expectations are on people when it comes to age and responsibility. So hopefully you find this helpful. I've included the slide presentation for you as well. But remember, with each of these sections, you're looking for the 3 W's. Who's the who? And to make sure you don't get too specific, just because they're talking about a 20-year-old Marine, they're not just talking, that's not the automatic who. The who might be more general. It might be young people. It might be adolescents, stuff like that. And then you need the what. What's the main idea within each of these sections? What's the point? And then, of course, lastly, you need the why. Why is this section significant? What does it reveal? How does it support the author's main idea, especially in terms of the age of responsibility? So I hope you found this helpful. And if you need any assistance or help on that, please reach out and email me. Thanks.